Welcome back to Talk the Walk with me, Sarah Wong. I'm with Paul Zimmerman, who argued that Hong Kong should reopen with the rest of the world first without waiting up for the mainland. Thank you very much, Councillor, for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Your argument was also partly based on the practicality of cross-border negotiations. Now, Chief Executive Carrie Lam, who is still in office and will be until the end of June, said in late March that resuming cross-border travel will be the administration's top priority once the fifth COVID wave subsides. Why weren't you more optimistic?
Well, the reality for negotiations between on this particular topic and the mainland became apparent to me when Michael Chen was on a particular radio show, RTHK radio show, and he was asked a question as well. And he made the point, he said, people have to be aware that to negotiate opening up, there is no national institution that you negotiate that with, and then there is an agreement for the whole country. That we will have to negotiate with every municipality, with every province individually. And Shenzhen may have very different views based on their current situation, their risk levels, and their perception of the need of opening up. And the same for Dongguan, and the same for other areas in the Guangdong province, and then the same within other areas in the whole country. So for Hong Kong to suggest that we open up with the mainland first, there has never been any indication or any suggestion that there is a good mechanism, that we have a timeline, that the criteria, the conditions have all been determined. None of that has ever been presented. And I doubt that any of that actually exists. And so the whole suggestion that we are going to open it with the mainland has never been confirmed as something we can do expediently and in good time. And so without a solid framework, you can't give businesses and people any insight, you can't give them any confidence, then the outcome is going to be very negative. Nobody can prepare for it, businesses can't count on it. So businesses and economy will go and slip, continue to slip.
The mainland authorities were cautious in their own right, well, especially with their jobs on the line. But to my understanding, wasn't our negotiations mainly based on talks with authorities in Shenzhen, because Shenzhen authorities have their own mechanism to communicate with the rest of the country across mainland China, and our priority is to resume cross-border travel with Shenzhen first, and then the Shenzhen authorities decide whether they, the travel conditions within their city, their jurisdictions with the rest of the country, because China is such a vast country, and as you said, there's no national mechanism to decide a one size fits all policy. So it doesn't seem as complicated as you put it, if our mission, our sole task is to ensure that we reach an agreement with Shenzhen authorities.
Well, that may well, let's assume that you're right, that at the moment, once we have an agreement with Shenzhen, then the path is set for opening up with the mainland. Where is that agreement? We are 2.5 years into this COVID pandemic. Where is that understanding? Where is that clarity to the community and to the business community that there is an understanding of what the process is, what the criteria are, what the infection levels that are acceptable? I mean, none of that has ever been communicated, has ever been clarified, has ever been set out, is totally invisible. And from my understanding from comments on the radio by a person who's closer to the fire than I am, Michael Chen, I can only assume that this is the way you craft it, that we just have a solution with Shenzhen and then the rest will follow. It may not be the case.
In Hong Kong, you've argued that rather than dynamic zero, dynamic living with COVID is the way out. And that's against pro-establishment and government lines. How do you make sure that your advice will be heeded on, and how would you respond to arguments made by some Beijing loyalists that the mere advocacy for living with COVID threatens national security?
Well, I leave those radical comments on the side, and I disagree with you that that we have a view on living with COVID and zero COVID along political lines. When I read the papers and under commentaries, I see people from both sides saying, guys, come on, we've got to open up. We've got to open up first. We've got to learn to live with COVID. There is no, zero COVID is an untenable position ultimately because the rest of the world has already, whether on purpose, whether because they decided or whether they can't otherwise, already is moving ahead with living with COVID. It's the reality that surrounds us, and we'll have to move on with that if we want to be part of the economy of the rest of the world. If we don't, and we shut ourselves out from the economy of the rest of the world, we're damaging Hong Kong. We're damaging the health of the people in Hong Kong. The reports of suicides are not looking particularly pretty in Hong Kong. The economy is down and people losing their jobs, people losing their businesses. And from my perspective, I see a lot of people who have moved out. Bankers who, you know, a particular banker that I know kept his house here but has moved to Singapore, but is now, or because he can't see the light of day, is planning to kind of give up on the house properly and entirely. Businesses, as they are living with this situation and have moved their resources outside Hong Kong so they can continue their business, they will get used to that. They will start making decisions of not moving those resources back. Well,
Paul, are you essentially saying that the issues of reopening up Hong Kong, our common eagerness to see a return to some sort of normality is somehow reuniting the Hong Kong society, reuniting people from different sides of the aisle? We're seeing some sort of rare unity that we haven't seen in a very long time because of our common goal to reopen Hong Kong soon.
Yes, and I think that we all have to understand that it's not that one is against opening up with the mainland. Opening up with the mainland was a really good idea when we were both at very low infection rates, and so we had an opportunity. It didn't happen. Now we have a divergence of the situation, and we all have to realize that that is real. So for the time being, it is not a pivot away from opening with the mainland. We want to open up with the mainland as soon as possible also. But in the meantime, we should open up with the rest of the world, move along with the economy, help the mainland by being successful as an international city, make sure we keep our economy strong here. And then as the mainland settles itself with COVID, and that will take months before this is going to happen from their, given their vaccination rates and given their immunity levels, it will take time. And so by the time they have settled and are confident that the healthcare system is not going to put under extreme pressure, then we can also open up with the mainland again.
Some opponents of your argument will say this: the reason that many parts of the world have decided to move on is because they failed, essentially, to keep the virus at bay, let alone eradicate it. And those countries didn't readjust their COVID strategies because of economic concerns or whatnot. They're simply forced into submission. What do you make of that?
Absolutely. So totally right. I mean, but that's the reality we live with, that the majority of the world has been unable to follow through on a strategy that was so successful in Asia, that was so successful in Hong Kong and in China. It was, the rest of the world couldn't. And because they couldn't, we have these developments of variants, and they start spreading in the world, and they becoming more, they are becoming more transmissible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the reality we have. That's the cards we are dealt with. They couldn't follow us. Now we'll have to follow the rest of the world, because we have to accept that COVID, we can't get rid of it because the rest of the world didn't go along with where we went. So that is an acceptance of the failure of the rest of the world, but that's the reality we're living with. We can't change it. We can't go back around the world and wipe it out, or in one way or another pretend it doesn't exist.
Now, sir, you've been a regular guest on our show. The last time you've come on is already around 2 years ago in our studio. We have a quick minute here, but I do want to ask you this. Now, at the time, you mentioned the absolute failure of the relationship between Beijing, the SCR government, and our communities in Hong Kong here. Is that dysfunctional relationship that you've pointed out 2 years ago the very root of our predicament today when it comes to the handling of COVID, and what will be our way out?
Absolutely. I mean, the quality of our governance and the ability of the Hong Kong government to negotiate with Beijing has always been weak, and we haven't really addressed it. Now that we have the NSL in place, and now we have kind of like a uniformity in the command structure, there is an opportunity that we should consider that this will change. And this comes back to previous positions that I've taken, where, are we going to have a mayor who runs the city, like in the mainland? The mayor runs the city, and there is a party secretary who deals with the political matters and the relationship with Beijing. Now, if we can separate that and have a real strong CS under John Lee, who can operate as a mayor, that would be one way. Or, whether the head of the election committee becomes the party secretary, and John Lee is acting as the mayor and running the city. One way or another, we have to pull these things apart. London and New York do not have to worry about their relationship with the nation. They know where they are. The mayor wakes up, he fixes the traffic light that was broken, he makes sure that the train runs. We got to get to that position again, that we have a mayor in Hong Kong who runs the city as a city, and that these other matters are being left to another level of politics. And if we separate those, then we can run the city and run ahead with. We have many outdated procedures. We have many outdated work arrangements in Hong Kong. We have to do a lot of work that we haven't done since 1982.
Paul Zimmerman, Vice Chairman of the Southern District Council, thank you very much indeed for sharing your perspectives with us.
Thanks for having me.
Talk to What will return next Saturday on HKIBC. Until then, I'm Sarah Wong. See you then, and good night.